He stared at the photo on his screen, hands trembling, breath caught in his throat. It was just a scanned image, faded and slightly blurred, but it hit him like a punch to the chest. A younger Evelyn, maybe in her 30s, stood barefoot in the grass, sunlight in her hair, laughing as a man wrapped his arms around her. A husband. A life she'd built. A life he had just shattered. Daniel couldn't look away. His finger hovered over the mouse, frozen just inches from clicking withdraw. $45,000, her entire savings, ready to be siphoned into an offshore account. It was all set. But that photo, it did something to him. The window next to his desk rattled from a gust of wind. Rain tapped against the glass like it was trying to pull him out of this moment, this mess of screens and lies. The silence in his apartment was suffocating, broken only by the soft hum of his laptop and the words replaying in his head, her last message. Michael, I've never felt this safe with anyone since Harold passed. You make me feel young again. Safe. He made her feel safe. Daniel slammed the laptop shut. Who was this woman he had just destroyed? And why did he suddenly care? He stood up, pacing. His stomach churned. The money didn't matter anymore, it never really did, not in a way that filled the emptiness. But now? Now he couldn't breathe past the weight of what he'd done. Evelyn wasn't just another name on a spreadsheet. She was real. And he'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over the delete button. But the account was still active. She still believed he was coming back. What happens when a man who's made a career out of stealing hearts suddenly finds he's lost his own? The screen lit up again. A new message. From Evelyn. And he couldn't bring himself to open it. Evelyn Harper never expected to fall in love again. At 72, her days were quiet, predictable. She'd wake up before sunrise, make a cup of Earl Grey, and sit by the window of her modest home in Maine, watching the fog roll off the hills. The same view she used to share with Harold, her late husband of 45 years. He passed away 2 winters ago, after a long battle with lung cancer. Since then, Evelyn had become a shadow of herself, still kind, still graceful, but hollow in places no one could see. Her daughter Claire visited when she could, once a week for groceries, a quick lunch, sometimes longer if Evelyn was having a particularly lonely spell. But Evelyn had learned not to lean too hard. Claire was busy. A job, a husband, 2 kids. Life moved fast for everyone but her. Her evenings stretched into silence. Television hummed in the background, but she rarely paid attention. The loneliness was sharpest at night, like the house itself was grieving. One evening, on the gentle suggestion of a friend from church, Evelyn joined a Silver Hearts online community for seniors. It was innocent enough at first. Message boards, recipe exchanges, a virtual bingo group. But then came a private message. A man named Michael. He said he was a retired doctor, living in Geneva. He was polite, eloquent, charming, the kind of old-fashioned gentleman Evelyn hadn't encountered in decades. They began chatting. Just a few lines a day. Then full conversations. Then daily emails that felt like handwritten letters from another era. Michael told her about his travels, his love for classical music, the books he was reading. He sent her photos of sunsets over the Alps, his little dog named Charlie, and even his garden. And Evelyn? She started to laugh again. She felt something stir deep in her chest, something soft and forgotten. She didn't tell Claire about Michael. Not at first. It felt too sacred, too delicate to explain. And truthfully, Claire wouldn't understand. She was always warning Evelyn about online weirdos and scam stories on the news. But Michael wasn't like that. He never asked for anything. He just listened. Meanwhile, Daniel Cruz was on the other side of the screen, 35 years old, buried in wires, burner phones, and profiles he'd created under a dozen names. But Michael was different. From the moment Evelyn replied, he noticed something unusual. She wasn't like the others. She didn't flirt aggressively or fish for compliments. She just wanted conversation. A companion. At first, Daniel treated it like any other target. Build trust. Mirror interests. Study her language patterns. Pretend to care. The usual steps. But days turned to weeks, and he found himself lingering on her messages longer than necessary. He would read them again before bed, sometimes imagining what it would feel like to be someone she could actually love, not the fraud he was. Evelyn started dressing up for their video calls even though he always kept his camera off, citing a broken webcam or weak connection abroad. Still, she did her hair, wore lipstick, and prepared tea before sitting in front of her computer like it was a real date. She started humming while cleaning the kitchen. She talked to Michael about Harold. About Claire. About the fear of being forgotten. Daniel, behind the curtain, listened. And for once, he wasn't bored. He was moved. But the duality tore at him. He was conning her. Every sweet reply chipped away at his own conscience, even as the plan unfolded exactly as it was supposed to. How does a man pretending to be someone else begin to lose track of who he really is? And Evelyn, what happens when the only person making her feel alive again never truly existed? One real woman. One fake man. Two hearts inching closer towards something neither could control. It started with simple things. A good morning, beautiful at 6:47 a.m., just as Evelyn sat down with her tea. A quote from a poem. A comment about the weather in Maine even though Michael was supposedly thousands of miles away in Switzerland. At first, it made her blush. She hadn't been called beautiful in years, not since Harold. And even then, it had always been a quieter sort of love, the kind that showed itself through scraped knees bandaged, gas tanks filled, favorite meals made without asking. Harold had been a man of few words, but infinite care. Michael, however, was the opposite. He said things. Noticed things. Every message felt like it had been written with care, not copied and pasted. By the end of the first month, Evelyn found herself rushing through chores just to sit down at her computer in time. Michael never missed a message. He remembered the anniversary of Harold's passing. He asked about Claire's birthday, even though Evelyn had only mentioned it in passing. He listened. And that, more than anything, was what began to undo her. Because loneliness isn't always about being alone. Sometimes it's about being unseen. And Michael saw her. He noticed the words she used. Her love of birds. How she always signed off with, "Hope you rest well, wherever you are." He told her his story too. A little at a time. Michael had lost his wife to a sudden stroke 10 years ago. He never remarried. Said no one ever filled the space she left behind. He sent her a photo once, a woman with soft eyes, her arms wrapped around a golden retriever in a sunflower field. Evelyn looked at that photo for a long time, not because she doubted its truth, but because she understood that kind of grief. Loss recognizes loss. And through that shared ache, trust began to take root. They began video calling, or rather, voice calling with static-filled screens. Michael always had an excuse for keeping his camera off. Poor signal. Damaged lens. Once, he even said he felt self-conscious, that he wasn't as handsome as she probably imagined. Evelyn laughed it off. She wasn't here for looks. She was here for connection. And connection? That, they had in spades. He read her poetry. He sang to her once an old Frank Sinatra song, just slightly off-key. She cried. She sent him photos of her garden, the one Harold had built for her in their backyard. The peonies were in bloom, and she wanted to share it with someone who'd care. Michael cared. Or at least, she thought he did. One night, she told him something she hadn't told anyone since Harold died, that sometimes she heard his footsteps in the hallway. That she still slept on one side of the bed, waiting for someone who would never come home. Michael didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss her. He whispered, "You're not crazy. You're just still loving." And that sentence, it melted something inside her. For the first time in years, Evelyn went to sleep feeling warm. Meanwhile, Daniel, the real man behind the Michael persona, was navigating something entirely unfamiliar. He had conned dozens, maybe hundreds of people. Romance scams. Inheritance schemes. Investment tricks. He was skilled, methodical, emotionless. The job was to mimic connection, not feel it. But with Evelyn, it had crept up on him. Slowly. Subtly. Like fog settling over water. He found himself checking her messages before any others. Spending longer crafting his replies. Pausing when she shared something too personal, like the way she still kept Harold's coat in the closet because it smelled like him. There were moments, real moments, when Daniel wanted to break character. Just type, "This is me. My name's not Michael. I'm 35. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Florida. I have no dog. I have no wife. But I think about you more than I should." But he never did. Because the scam wasn't over. And the money she had saved, he needed it. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. But inside, the foundation of his deception was beginning to shift. He no longer saw Evelyn as a mark. He saw her as someone who deserved better than what he was about to do. And yet, he kept going. Every lie was laced with a little more guilt. Every compliment tasted a little more bitter. But for Evelyn, none of that was visible. All she saw was a man who made her feel alive again. A man who filled the long silences with tenderness. A man who said the right thing every time. She printed one of his emails and tucked it into a drawer next to Harold's letters. Just in case. Just in case this was real. She didn't know she was building her entire world on words spun from air. And he didn't know that, for the first time, he wasn't faking all of it. Not completely. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it so dangerous. The shift was gradual, like a slow tide creeping up the shore, barely noticeable until it soaked through everything. The warmth, the tenderness, the attention, all still there. But now, there was something new in Michael's messages. A hint of worry. A subtle undertone of urgency. He told Evelyn that he was in the middle of finalizing a business deal in Europe. Something about importing medical equipment for a new clinic. He didn't go into too much detail, said it was complicated, full of red tape. But he kept coming back to one word, stuck. "I feel so close to getting everything sorted," he wrote, "but my funds are frozen temporarily due to banking regulations. I didn't see this coming, Evie. And I hate asking you, but..." Evelyn stared at the message for a long time. She wasn't naive. She'd watched enough news reports about scams. Claire had warned her about people pretending to be someone they're not. But this wasn't that. This was Michael. Her Michael. The man who had memorized the names of her grandkids. The man who had cried with her on Harold's death anniversary. The man who told her she was worth loving again. So she sent him $5,000. He was apologetic. Grateful. Told her he'd pay it back in full as soon as he returned home. "Just a little longer," he said. "Then we'll have that picnic you keep talking about." And Evelyn believed him. Not just because of what he said, but because of how he made her feel. No one had ever put her at the center of their world like this, at least not since Harold. And Michael always made her feel like she mattered. But the requests didn't stop there. A week later, he needed help with customs fees. Then there was a legal consultant. Then flight rebooking. Each time, he reassured her, always gently, always respectfully. He never demanded. Just explained. And every message ended with a dream of holding her hand, of walking through the Maine woods, of starting a new chapter together. And each time Evelyn wired more. $10,000. Then $15,000. She dipped into her savings. Then her emergency fund. Then the account she'd set aside for her grandchildren's college. She told herself it was temporary. That love meant sacrifice. That Harold would understand. But cracks were beginning to show. Claire noticed the tension in her mother's face, the way Evelyn flinched when she asked about her finances. When Claire pressed, Evelyn brushed her off, said everything was fine, just a little tight this month, that she'd made some investments online. Claire didn't buy it. She started snooping, found bank statements that didn't make sense, transfers to overseas accounts, all under vague descriptions. When she confronted Evelyn, it turned into an argument, one of the worst they'd had in years. "You don't understand," Evelyn snapped. "You're not alone. You have your life. I finally have someone who sees me." Claire left in tears. Evelyn went back to her computer. Michael had messaged again. This time, his tone was different. There was more pressure, words like urgent, desperate, "This is my last chance." He said he was embarrassed to ask, but he didn't know who else to turn to. And Evelyn, lonely, heart-tethered, guilt-ridden from the fight with her daughter, said yes again. Daniel, on the other end, watched the transaction go through. He sat in silence. It should have felt like success. Another phase complete. Another transfer secured. But it didn't feel like success. It felt like a line had been crossed. One he couldn't uncross. He looked at her last message. "I trust you, Michael. Please come home soon." Daniel closed his laptop slowly. The money was real. But so was her faith in him. And he had just turned that into currency. How much does trust cost? And what happens when the debt can't be repaid? By now, Evelyn's world revolved around Michael. He was the first thought in the morning, the last name she whispered at night. Her phone was always within reach, just in case he messaged. Every ding of a new email sent her heart fluttering. She stopped watching her favorite shows. She skipped her book club. She even declined Sunday dinner with Claire and the grandkids, claiming she was a little tired. But the truth was simple, she didn't want to miss a single moment with him. Michael made her feel seen, heard, important. He remembered the small things, how she took her coffee, how she liked to sit near the fireplace when it rained, the song she and Harold danced to at their wedding. His messages weren't just words on a screen. They were lifelines. And slowly, quietly, Evelyn began to pull away from everyone else. Claire noticed it first. At their weekly lunch, Evelyn was distracted. Her eyes kept darting to her phone. When Claire asked how things were going, Evelyn gave vague, cheerful answers and quickly changed the subject. She looked happier than Claire had seen her in months, but there was something off. Something guarded. Then Claire saw the money. While helping Evelyn sort some paperwork, she stumbled on a bank receipt. A wire transfer to a foreign name. She tried to stay calm. Asked her mom about it. Evelyn froze. "It's nothing," she said too quickly. "Just helping a friend. It's temporary. He's coming back soon." Claire's stomach sank. She asked. Evelyn sighed. "Michael." That was the first time she'd ever said his name out loud to her daughter. Claire sat in stunned silence. When Evelyn showed her a photo, the same stock photo Daniel had used on countless victims, Claire's heart broke. She saw the glow in her mother's eyes, the fragile hope, the belief. And she didn't know how to tell her it wasn't real. "You don't know him, Mom. He could be anyone. Please be careful." But Evelyn bristled. "He's not just anyone. He's the only one who listens. The only one who makes me feel like I matter." Claire left that day in tears, unsure of how to break the spell. And the isolation only deepened. Evelyn stopped answering calls. She told her friends she was busy. She told herself Claire was just being overprotective. That she didn't understand what it felt like to be alone, truly alone, after losing the love of your life. Evelyn wasn't being naive, she was just hopeful. And hope can be blinding. Meanwhile, Daniel, behind the curtain, living out the Michael fantasy from his dingy Florida apartment, was unraveling. He had done this before. He had written hundreds of fake love letters. Created dozens of personas. He had scammed wealthy women, lonely women, elderly men. It was a business. But this? Evelyn? This was starting to feel like something else. He read her messages twice, 3 times. He found himself smiling at her stories, her quirks. He had learned that she liked to hum when she cooked. That she talked to Harold's photo every morning. That she believed the smell of gardenias meant angels were near. Daniel had never believed in angels. But now? He wasn't so sure. Each time she wired money, a part of him flinched. It wasn't supposed to feel this way. He'd built this lie to take from her, but now, it was giving him something. Something he didn't even know he was missing. And that terrified him. Because Evelyn had no idea she was falling in love with a ghost. A man who didn't exist. A voice crafted from fragments of falsehood. But the feelings? The connection? Those parts felt disturbingly real. And Daniel, trapped in his own lie, began to feel something he had never expected. Guilt. He stayed up at night reading her old messages, his finger hovering over the send button on confessions he never sent. She deserved more than a fantasy. But he didn't know how to give her the truth without breaking her. And so, like Evelyn, he stayed silent. Trapped in the comfort of the lie. Afraid of what would happen when the truth finally came crashing through. How do you escape a world you created, when it's the only place you've ever felt real? It happened on a Tuesday. Evelyn had just come back from her morning walk, the one she'd started skipping ever since Michael became her daily routine. But that day, she needed air. The house felt heavy. Her chest even heavier. She brewed a fresh pot of tea, sat by the window, and refreshed her inbox. Nothing. Not a word from Michael in over 48 hours. That had never happened before. He always sent her something, even if just a heart emoji or a quote from one of his favorite authors. She clicked refresh again. Still nothing. Her hands started to tremble. When the message finally came, her breath caught in her throat. It was short. Cold. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Please don't contact me again. No explanation. No voice call. No goodbye. Just silence. Evelyn stared at the screen, rereading the sentence until the words lost all meaning. She opened their old messages, hundreds of them, scrolling through their shared dreams, his promises, the things she had believed with her whole heart. He was gone. And with him, so was her money. She checked her accounts. Empty. Every savings account. The emergency fund. The inheritance Harold had left her. The money meant for the grandkids' futures. Gone. Panic rose like a wave crashing through her. Her hands reached for the phone. She dialed Michael. Straight to voicemail. She emailed. No response. She opened the chat app. Blocked. She didn't cry at first. She just sat still, staring ahead, her face blank, as if her mind had disconnected from her body. The hurt hadn't sunk in yet, only the shock. Like stepping off a cliff and realizing the ground wasn't there anymore. When Claire arrived hours later, after noticing her mother hadn't read any of her messages, she found Evelyn in the same chair. Motionless. Tea cold beside her. Her voice came out cracked and childlike. He's gone. Claire knelt beside her and took her hands. And when Evelyn finally broke down, it wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. Dignity. Hope. It was about losing someone, again. But this time, it wasn't to death. It was to betrayal. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in front of his own screen, watching the transaction history light up like a scoreboard. The final wire had gone through. The account was drained. He had done it. Everything according to plan. But the victory felt hollow. Her last message haunted him. I hope you're okay. Please tell me you're safe. He closed his laptop. He couldn't breathe. This wasn't just another job. It was a life he had touched, a heart he had dismantled. He had stolen everything except the part of Evelyn that mattered most. And that was the part he could never give back. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, the glow of the computer screen the only light in the room. Evelyn's final message echoed in his mind, louder than any alert, louder than the voice of reason he'd silenced months ago. "I hope you're okay. Please tell me you're safe." Even after she realized what had happened, she worried about him. It broke something in him. He opened her file again, photos she'd sent. Her garden in bloom. A birthday cake she'd made for Claire's youngest grandchild. A scanned love letter Harold had written her in 1973. And, of course, that photo, the one that stopped him from hitting the withdraw button the first time. Evelyn standing barefoot in the grass, laughing with the sun on her face. Pure joy. Pure trust. Daniel had used hundreds of photos from strangers' lives to build fake identities. But this was the first time someone else's life had started to feel more real than his own. He opened a draft email and began to type. "My name isn't Michael. I'm sorry. I'm a fraud. And I never meant to." But the words blurred. His fingers stopped. He couldn't send it. Not because he didn't mean it, but because it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't return her money. It wouldn't fix her heart. It wouldn't undo the damage he had done. Still, the guilt wouldn't let him rest. He searched her hometown. Found out where she lived. He almost booked a flight. Almost walked away from the shadows of his fake names and offshore accounts. But what would he even say? "I'm the man who made you believe you mattered, just to take everything away." No apology could touch that kind of wound. So instead, Daniel did something he'd never done before. He deleted the Michael profile. Erased the email history. Shut down the accounts. And he didn't open new ones. He packed a small bag, grabbed his coat, and walked for hours. He ended up in front of a church, one he used to walk past as a kid but never dared to enter. This time, he stepped inside. Sat in the back pew. He didn't pray. He didn't even know how. But he sat there, still, ashamed, broken, silent. Somewhere far away, Evelyn was trying to breathe through the wreckage. Piece by piece, Claire was helping her rebuild, starting with a fraud report, then a visit to the bank. They recovered a fraction of what was lost. But Evelyn never asked for the money back. All she wanted was an answer to one question. Why? Daniel couldn't give her that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time in his life, he wanted to try. Evelyn never got the apology she hoped for. No handwritten letter. No phone call. No final confession to make sense of it all. But she stopped waiting. Somewhere between the sleepless nights and the long afternoons filled with silence, she realized something important. She didn't need closure from the man who broke her. She needed healing from the woman she used to be. It started with little things. Claire came over more often. They cooked dinner together. Watched old movies on the couch like they used to before Harold passed. One night, Evelyn laughed at a scene, really laughed, and Claire looked at her like she hadn't seen that version of her in years. Maybe she hadn't. She began therapy. Joined a local support group for scam victims. For the first time, she spoke her story out loud. Not with shame, but with clarity. And in the faces of other victims, some younger, some older, she saw something she never expected: compassion, not judgment. Because it wasn't about being stupid. It was about being human. Hungry for connection in a world that had forgotten how to slow down and listen. Evelyn learned to be gentler with herself. She planted new flowers in the garden Harold built, yellow tulips, his favorite. She donated the vintage tea set she'd planned to save for Michael to a charity auction. She deleted every email thread, every trace of his name. And slowly, the fog began to lift. Daniel, on the other hand, disappeared. Not in the way he used to, with fake names and new cons. This time, he disappeared into himself. He got a job, nothing glamorous, just night shifts cleaning offices. No screens, no scripts, no lies. He didn't know if redemption was possible, but he knew he could start by doing no more harm. Some nights, he still thought of her. He imagined Evelyn sitting in her garden, her hands in the dirt, the sun warming her shoulders. And he wished, more than anything, that she was okay. Not rich. Not recovered. Just, okay. Because somehow, in all the deceit, she had shown him something real. Not love. Not forgiveness. But the kind of goodness that makes a man question the life he's built. Evelyn would never know the full weight of the effect she had on him. And maybe that was for the best. She didn't need him to be sorry anymore. She just needed to be free. And finally, she was. Romance scams don't just steal money. They steal trust. They steal time. They steal the parts of people they were just starting to heal. Evelyn's story isn't rare. It's happening right now, to someone's mother, someone's grandfather, someone who just wants to feel like they matter again. And often, they don't speak up. Not because they don't know they've been scammed, but because they're ashamed. But Evelyn? She chose something different. She chose to speak. And in doing so, she gave others the strength to do the same. Let this be more than just a story. Let it be a wake-up call. Talk to the people you love. Ask them how they're really doing. Teach them what red flags look like, sweet words from strangers with perfect stories, always just a little too far away, always needing just a little help. Because connection is powerful. And so is manipulation. Scammers don't prey on weakness. They prey on loneliness. They find the quietest parts of a person's life and fill it with noise that sounds like love. But we can fight back with honesty, awareness, and most of all, compassion. Evelyn lost nearly everything. But she gained something, too. The power to rebuild. The courage to speak. And the reminder that even when someone tries to turn your kindness into a weapon, it's still worth being kind. If you or someone you know has been targeted by a romance scam, don't suffer in silence. There are resources. There are people who understand. There is life after betrayal. Share this story. Start a conversation. And remind someone they're not alone. Because healing begins the moment we decide not to hide. And the first step is telling the truth.